Every motorcycle on this list changed history, not in a small way. These 5 machines redefined what a motorcycle could be, how fast it could go, how it could be built, and what it meant to ride. One of them saved a company. One of them created a culture. One of them was so advanced that the competition needed 20 years to catch up. The boldest British motorcycle ever built was not the fastest, not the most powerful, and not the most successful. It was the most fearless. The engineers who designed it took risks that no modern manufacturer would dare to take. 5 motorcycles, 5 acts of courage, and only one was the boldest. Let us count them down. Number 5. The Vincent Black Shadow. Stevenage, 1948. Philip Vincent was a designer who refused to compromise. His motorcycles were the most expensive, the most advanced, and the most idiosyncratic in the world. The Black Shadow was the ultimate Vincent, a 1,000 cubic centimeter V-twin, producing 55 horsepower at 5,700 revolutions per minute. The top speed was 125 miles per hour, verified on a test track, making the Black Shadow the fastest production motorcycle in the world. A record it held for 24 years, until the Kawasaki Z1 appeared in 1972, but the speed was not the boldest thing about the Vincent. The boldest thing was the engineering. Vincent used the engine as a stressed member of the frame, meaning the engine itself carried the structural loads. The rear suspension was a cantilever system, with a central spring box, a design so unusual that it looked like it belonged on a different planet. The front suspension was a girder fork design, and the brakes were single leading-edge drums. Everything about the Vincent was unconventional, and everything was designed by a man who believed that his way was the only way. Philip Vincent was so committed to his vision that he refused to adopt convention even when the factory was losing money. The Vincent Black Shadow was the ultimate expression of that conviction, a motorcycle built without compromise, at any cost. Production totaled roughly 1,700 units across all Vincent models, and the company closed in 1955. The Vincent also had a racing pedigree that most enthusiasts forget. Rolly Free, an American racer, set a speed record on a Vincent Black Lightning, a tuned version of the Black Shadow, at 150 miles per hour on the Bonneville salt flats in 1948. He was wearing a bathing suit, a shower cap, and nothing else, lying flat on the tank to reduce wind resistance. The photograph of Free, stretched out on the Vincent in his bathing suit, became one of the most famous images in motorcycling history, and it cemented the Vincent's reputation as the fastest, the most extreme, and the most fearless motorcycle in the world. The Black Lightning, of which only 30 were ever built, is now the most valuable motorcycle in the world. One sold at auction for over $900,000. Today, the Black Shadow is one of the most collectible motorcycles in the world, and the design influences can be seen in modern motorcycles from Aprilia to Yamaha. Number 4. The BSA Gold Star. Birmingham, 1938. The Gold Star earned its name when Wal Handley won a gold medal at the Isle of Man, and BSA stamped a small gold star on the tank. But the bold decision was not the name, it was the engine. The Gold Star used a 4-stroke single-cylinder engine, at a time when the rest of the industry was moving to twins. BSA bet that a well-engineered single, with the right bore and stroke, could produce as much power as a twin, with less weight and less complexity. The bet paid off. The Gold Star DBD-34 produced 42 horsepower at 6,800 revolutions per minute, and the top speed was over 100 miles per hour. The Gold Star also had a technical detail that set it apart from every other British single. The engine used a roller-bearing crankshaft, which meant the big end of the connecting rod ran on roller bearings instead of plain bearings. The roller bearing design allowed the engine to rev higher and more freely than a plain bearing engine, and the Gold Star was famous for its willingness to spin to the red line. The sound of a Gold Star at 6,800 revolutions per minute, with the Amal carburetor gulping air and the exhaust barking through a megaphone silencer, was one of the most distinctive sounds in British motorcycling. The engine note was sharp, mechanical, and urgent, and riders who raced Gold Stars said the engine actually got smoother and more responsive at high revolutions, the opposite of most singles. The Gold Star dominated production racing at the Isle of Man, winning the Clubman's Grand Prix multiple times, and the bike became the ultimate cafe racer. The boldness was in the single-cylinder choice, a decision that went against the trend and proved that one cylinder, designed right, could beat two. Production totaled roughly 20,000 units across all variants, and the Gold Star remained in production until 1963, long after most manufacturers had abandoned the big single. Number 3. The Triumph Bonneville. Meriden, 1959. The Bonneville is the most famous British motorcycle ever built, and its boldness was in its ambition. Triumph named the bike after the Bonneville salt flats, where the company had set speed records, and the name was a statement of intent. The Bonneville was designed to be the fastest, the most glamorous, and the most desirable production motorcycle in the world. The 650 cubic centimeter parallel twin produced 46 horsepower, and the top speed was 115 miles per hour. But the true boldness was in the marketing. Triumph positioned the Bonneville not just as a motorcycle, but as a lifestyle. The bike was marketed to young men who wanted freedom, speed, and style, and the advertising featured sunny roads, leather jackets, and the promise of adventure. The strategy worked. The Bonneville became the poster bike of the 60s, appearing on bedroom walls across the world, and the name Bonneville became synonymous with cool. Marlon Brando rode a Triumph in the Wild One. The Bonneville also had a technical innovation that most riders never noticed. The engine used a twin carburetor setup, with one carburetor per cylinder, while most British twins used a single carburetor. The twin carburetor design gave each cylinder its own fuel supply, which improved tuning precision and power output. The Bonneville was, in effect, two single-cylinder engines joined at the crank, each with its own carburetor, its own intake, and its own exhaust. This was the Triumph engineering philosophy: simple, proven, and effective. The twin carburetor Bonneville was the basis for the Triumph name, because the precise fuel delivery allowed the engine to produce maximum power at high speed, which is exactly what was needed on the Bonneville salt flats. Steve McQueen rode a Triumph. Evel Knievel jumped Triumphs. The Bonneville created the culture of the British motorcycle as a symbol of rebellion, freedom, and youth, and that culture outlived the bike itself. Production totaled over 100,000 units across all decades, and the Bonneville name is still used by Triumph today, 65 years after the original. A question for you: Bonneville or Commando? Write just the name in the comments. Both defined British biking. Only one was your favorite. Number 2. The Norton Commando. Bracebridge Street, 1968. The Commando was the most revolutionary British motorcycle of the post-war era, and the boldness was in the frame. The ice-elastic suspension system, which mounted the engine and gearbox in rubber bushes to isolate the rider from vibration, was unlike anything else in the industry. Every other manufacturer tried to reduce vibration by balancing the engine. Norton reduced it by decoupling the engine from the frame entirely. The system was complex, required regular adjustment, and was controversial among purists. But it worked, and the Commando was the smoothest British motorcycle ever built. The 750 cubic centimeter parallel twin produced 58 horsepower, and the top speed was 115 miles per hour. The Commando also had one of the most beautiful fuel tanks in motorcycling history. The tank, sculpted with flowing lines and painted in bold colors, with the Norton logo on the sides, was a piece of industrial art. The tank was so admired that owners would polish it daily, and the aftermarket produced replica tanks in every conceivable color. The Commando was the last British motorcycle that was genuinely beautiful, the last bike that looked like it had been drawn by an artist rather than computed by an engineer. The lines of the tank, the curve of the seat, the angle of the exhaust, every detail was resolved with a care that spoke of pride. The Norton workers knew the Commando was special, and they built it accordingly. The Commando was named Motorcycle of the Year for 5 consecutive years, a record that has never been matched, and the bike became the last great British motorcycle of the classic era. The boldness was in the engineering decision to abandon convention and pursue an untested solution to the oldest problem in British motorcycling, the vibration of the parallel twin. The decision saved Norton, at least temporarily, and the Commando remains one of the most admired British motorcycles ever built. Number 1. The John Britten V1000. Christchurch, 1991. Wait, New Zealand? Yes. John Britten was a New Zealand architect who designed and built the most radical motorcycle the world has ever seen. The V1000 was built in a garage with a team of volunteers, and it competed against the factory teams of Ducati, Honda, and Suzuki in the World Superbike Championship. The bike was pure innovation. The engine was a V8, designed and cast by Britten and his team, producing 166 horsepower. The frame was carbon fiber, and the wheels were carbon fiber. The radiator was mounted under the seat, and the aerodynamic bodywork was designed by Britten himself. The bike had no conventional frame. The engine was a stressed member. The swing arm bolted directly to the engine cases, and the front suspension was a double wishbone design instead of telescopic forks. Every single component was unconventional, and every single component was designed by one man and his friends. The V1000 won the Daytona Battle of the Twins in 1992, beating factory-prepared Ducatis. It set speed records at the Bonneville salt flats, and it did all of this while being built in a garage in New Zealand, thousands of miles from the established motorcycle industry. John Britten died of cancer in 1995, at the age of 45. The Britten V1000 also had a tragic timing. John Britten was diagnosed with melanoma in 1994, and he died in 1995 at 45 years old. At the time of his death, the V1000 was still being developed, and the bike was on the verge of challenging for the World Superbike Championship. The potential was staggering. The bike had already beaten factory Ducatis at Daytona, and the engine was being developed for even more power. If Britten had lived, the V1000 might have become a production motorcycle, challenging the established manufacturers on track and in the showroom. His death was a loss not just for New Zealand, but for the entire motorcycle world. The 10 V1000s that exist are the most tangible reminder of what might have been. Only 10 V1000s were ever built. The V1000 is the boldest motorcycle ever built, not because it was the fastest or the most powerful, but because it proved that one man, with vision and determination, could take on the might of the global motorcycle industry and win. 5 motorcycles, 5 acts of courage. We started with the Vincent Black Shadow, the uncompromising V-twin that held the speed record for 24 years. Then the BSA Gold Star, the single cylinder that beat the twins. Next, the Triumph Bonneville, the bike that created a culture. Then the Norton Commando, the revolutionary isoelastic frame. And finally, the John Britten V1000, the garage-built V8 that beat the world. The surprising thing about this list is that the boldest motorcycle was not built by a British factory at all. It was built by a New Zealand architect in a garage with friends. But Britten's approach, the refusal to accept conventional wisdom, the willingness to bet everything on a new idea, was as British as Vincent, as Norton, as Triumph. The thread that connects all 5 of these motorcycles is the willingness to defy convention. Vincent built a motorcycle that was too expensive, too complex, and too fast for the market, and built it anyway. BSA built a single cylinder when everyone was building twins, and won. Triumph named a bike after a salt flat and bet the company on a lifestyle image. Norton invented a suspension system that nobody had tried, and it saved the company. And John Britten, in a garage on the other side of the world, built a V8 from nothing and beat the factories. Boldness is not about being right, it is about being willing to be wrong and doing it anyway. These 5 machines are the proof that the greatest engineering comes from the greatest risks, and that the motorcycles we remember are the ones that should not have worked, but did. These motorcycles were more than machines, they were declarations of independence. They were the proof that engineers who believed in their vision could outthink, outdesign, and outperform the giants of the industry. Which of these 5 machines do you think was the boldest? Vincent, Gold Star, Bonneville, Commando, or Britten? Write just the name in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey through the boldest motorcycles ever built, leave a like and subscribe, and tell us what you want us to take apart next. British cars, British buses, British racing cars, or something else entirely.